Hello everyone, welcome back to Unraveling Politics, a weekly political analysis show where I go over the week in politics that was and look ahead to the future. If you are new, please be sure to like the videos, and if you're a regular, please subscribe so you get alerts as to when new videos are out. Before we go on, you might have noticed this is a shorter episode, and don't worry, I'm not slacking off. I'm trying something new, and we're going to see how this works. I'm going to take a topic that I was going to talk about in the main episode and spin it off and put it later in the week. So this week's spin-off is going to be the Supreme Court rulings we got last week. I know sometimes people just want to focus on one thing, so that's what I'm going to be doing. Today will be everything else I plan on talking about. So please let me know if you like it, and we'll continue. And it won't. If we do continue, it won't be every week. It'll just be when I think it's appropriate. So we will begin with something quite unusual, and it is Republicans are planning a midterm convention in Dallas in September this year. Usually, party conventions are held in presidential years, and they nominate the presidential candidate after the long primary process, and essentially it's a giant pep rally. In other countries, generally conventions like this are annual or biannual, so this would move us more in line with other countries if this is something that they continue doing. For example, the British political parties, they hold conferences every single year. The Canadian Liberals and Conservatives hold it every other year, etc. The House of Representatives and Senate will be out of session in the week of the conference, which looks it will be on September the 9th and September the 10th. Since it only covers 2 days, it will likely be a shorter convention than usual, and it's also a little bit later than usual. But the idea is to get voters focused on candidates for their Senate and House of Representatives races. Texas is especially an interesting choice because it is the number one Senate election this year, and there's really not a close second. Maybe you can consider Maine to be a close second, but I would say that Texas is the number one Senate race, and whoever wins in Texas will probably win control of the U.S. Senate. So what about Democrats? Well, they were planning a midterm convention of their own, but they canceled it because they didn't have funding. And I think for Democrats, it is a missed opportunity. But considering they are leaderless at the moment, it does make sense to me. So is this a good idea? Well, at first glance, it looks like it would be, essentially because it gives free media coverage for an entire week, and it gives Republicans a chance to pick up momentum in the final 2 months of the campaign. However, I think that this is actually going to be a trap for House and Senate candidates. Trump is extremely unpopular with swing voters and in states like Georgia, Michigan, Maine, Texas, North Carolina, and others. And any candidate that goes to this convention is going to be labeled a MAGA extremist. In a red year, that might not be a big deal, but in a year like this is going to be especially damaging. And I expect speakers to be MAGA influencers and politicians, as well as Trump himself. I'm sure Ken Paxton will be speaking there, as well as their Senate candidates in places like North Carolina and Georgia and Wisconsin. So this gives us yet more stuff to look at as the campaign season kicks off in the fall. Usually in the weeks after Labor Day is when the campaign reaches its final stages. Since many people are away for the summer, people don't really think about politics as much over the summer, and it has the potential to be quite boring. So if you're out there and you somehow think a red wave is coming, generally in the years that Republicans pull ahead in the generic ballot are years they're in the ascendancy nationally. And generally that happens between now and October. In 2014 and 2022, they pulled ahead in September and October. In 2010, they pulled ahead in July. In 2006, 2018, and so far this year, which are expected to be blue years, the Democrats usually hold a consistent lead. So if there's any red wave watchers, then Labor Day will be the time that you begin watching. So next, we have the housing bill that Congress passed last week. Actually, it was a couple of weeks ago, and I talked about this last week. The bill has now been sent to the president as of a week ago, Monday the 29th, and the clock has begun for the president to do one of three things. He can either sign the bill, he can veto the bill, or he can do nothing and let it pass without his signature. And it is the last thing that he will most likely do, calling the bill a yawn. This bill kicks off a 10-day countdown for the bill to become law, excluding Sundays, which would take us to July the 10th at the end of this week. So to know what's in the bill, check out last week's episode, but the politics of it is that Trump will not sign the bill until the Save America Act is passed, and that bill will never pass, so logically he will never sign it. Even if the Senate was considering passing the Save America Act, there would really not be enough time or money to implement it before the midterms, as Senator Thom Tillis of North Carolina has stated. So that was probably going to be the end of it, and it probably would have no impact on the midterms. It would be a little damaging at most, except that's not the case because Trump made it worse by throwing gasoline on the proverbial fire. He said he wanted higher prices for homes, not lower ones. And yes, you heard me right, he wants higher house prices. He believes that high prices protect the wealth and net worth of existing homeowners and is worried about flooding the market with homes. He does have a point about this. Lower prices would harm current homeowners, except he is wrong for three reasons. One, practical, and two, political. Firstly, these homes are not going to flood the market. Even if construction began the day the bill was signed, it's going to take years to actually feel the impact of the bill. He will long be out of office by then. Then you have 2 political points. First, homeowners are more likely to be Republican voters, or at least in the not too distant past. Recently, it's shown signs of changing for reasons we've talked about over the last 2 years. Not making houses pleases your base today because it keeps prices high and their wealth high, but it does starve yourself of future voters in, say, 15 to 30 years. And he'll be dead by then, so he might not care about that. But his party definitely will. If that was it, I would say I would understand his thinking because he'll be gone, doesn't matter to him. It's not going to have any impact on the midterms, and the consequences, he'll never feel it. But I would still be confused as to why he would say all that out loud. Yet there is more. In the here and now, voters want fixes to affordability, and that was how he was elected in 2024. Democrats are winning big on affordability. They did so last year, as Trump did 2 years ago. So to keep current voters on side, many of whom want mortgages and rents down are going to be upset. And the fact that he now has all these clips of him saying that he loathes the idea of lowering prices, he likes inflation being up, he wants house prices being up, saying that he can't actually lower prices, or supposedly saying that, it will only make things worse. So my projection last week that this would have no impact was too optimistic. And then again, this is the guy who said, as I said earlier, who loves inflation that we saw during the war and still see even today. Speaking of Congress, the House adjourned early last week because there was a rebellion on the Republican benches, and I think this shows that the next 6 months of this Congress is going to be horrifically chaotic. So what happened was the House Rules Committee advanced the National Defense Authorization Act, which is a must-pass bill, and it was sent to the House floor. The National Defense Authorization Act is a must-pass piece of legislation which pays for the military and the goals, and it sets the goals and objectives of the military. It's usually passed in November and December, but the process begins in the summer. Then Johnson didn't bring the bill to a vote and sent Congress home early because Democrats were not going to vote for this thing because of the Save America Act, and the bill would have died in the Senate. Then they come back in the middle of July, and I assume that's when we're going to hear more about this. So here's what I think is going to happen. Johnson will cave. He will let the National Defense Authorization Act pass with the SAVE Act attached to it. It's going to go to the Senate. It will be filibustered, and it will never be voted on. Then they will get to blame Democrats for not passing the bill. Then Johnson will have to make a choice. The NDAA can pass the House of Representatives without the SAVE Act, and then it goes to the Senate and signed into law. What if Trump vetoes the NDAA, like he did in 2020 as he was leaving office? Or even worse, if there is no National Defense Authorization Act, then that halts the military from buying weapons, changing policy, spending money on programs, and that is unthinkable, which makes me think eventually Johnson will have to cave, and if he does, do conservative rebels throw him out the door? Or are we close enough to the election where they would put up with it and then make their move afterward? By then he might have already left. Or are they going to make their move soon, the election be damned? And I don't know, and I think that's something we're going to watch over the next few months. If you get tired of election coverage, in my humble opinion, it would be too late to throw him out without looking insanely stupid, but it could happen at any time. It takes just 9 Republican rebels and all Democrats to do it, and Democrats would vote for it. So lastly, we're going to end with news about the American economy. The U.S. economy added 52,000 jobs in the month of June, which is lower than expected. But this is no doubt because of the World Cup that has added jobs. So if anything, it's actually a little bit weaker than we think it is. And I imagine we're going to start to see those job losses again in July and the rest in August or September. The unemployment rate ticked down to 4.2%, mostly because the amount of people in the labor force has dropped to the lowest point in decades outside of COVID. So the story of the 2020s continues. The economy has been showing increasing signs of resilience, even as Americans are increasingly unhappy about the cost of living, which will no doubt feed into the midterm elections and the presidential elections of next year. What is most concerning about the people who left the labor force is they're not retirees. They're people who are ages 25 to 54, the prime demographic. And they're saying they're no longer looking for jobs, so they're technically not unemployed according to the survey. And if that's the case, you have to ask, why are they not looking for jobs anymore? Is it because they can't find it and they've given up? Maybe, and if that's the case, what does that say about our labor force and our overall economy? And that's definitely not a good thing as people go to the ballot boxes. So that's that for all for now. As always, please let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and I will see you in 2 days on Wednesday, and we're going to talk about some Supreme Court rulings. Bye-bye.